So let's talk. What do you all think? Woo. We got some thumbs up, we got some claps. Jewel, where do you want to start?
I guess I would like to point out just a couple of things that I really loved seeing it again. Number one, cats. Let me just say, was that the most unique use of cats in a movie? I thought that was so, I mean, that was one of the scariest things in it, and it was so perfect. But I think, and certainly I want to hear from other people, but one of the things that's interesting to me, two things. One is that the vampire person is so isolated. There is no vampire community that they can learn how to be a vampire from, since the father's not a vampire. And so that really is very touching and very painful. That's one thing that really I found a little, difficult. Because I'm always building community, and I love that the two young people create a community. But it was really hard to see someone that isolated. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that, except for the ability to fly, the vampire does not have super or extra natural powers. And I thought that was very interesting. I mean, probably also strength. They had strength, but I thought that was really interesting. And I also love their use of the Morse code, because I think that Morse code is one of those communication strategies that we all forget about because we don't really need it, except that in extreme situations, we might. And I love that they were able to communicate by Morse code. And I suggest anybody who thinks they're a revolutionary, learn how to do Morse code for when technology fails us. So those are my thoughts, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
Does anyone have any questions? I just want to speak to that isolation point that you brought up. Last night we watched The Lost Boys, which is very much about a vampire community and being brought into a community. So it is such a contrast.
Yeah, Lost Boys is also one of my faves. When we were doing the dramatic version of the Gilda stories, oh God, a long time ago, and I traveled with the company that was performing it. And every time we got to stay somewhere, we would rent a vampire movie. And that was by far everyone's favorite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I think it's Julie as well. Do we think that Oscar's fate is the same as Elie's father? What's the future of these
good question. Somebody answer out there, or I'll just keep talking.
I think they're passing it to you.
Okay. Well, this is how I keep imagining it. You know how in some vampire lore, vampires have mortals or semi-mortals who kind of protect them and travel with them and watch over them when they're sleeping, which I've included that in Gilda. I kept seeing Oscar as evolving into that, because he actually will grow physically into a man and be hopeful to her, I mean, we don't know how old Ellie was when the older man, brought them into his life. I mean, maybe he was young. We don't know. So that's kind of how I kept thinking of it. Although I keep hoping that Oscar's collection methods for blood become more sophisticated.
Let's hope. It's kind of amazing to think that these methods, they survived for so long with these methods, but maybe it's the world that changed around them.
Well, I think it was interesting, the quote unquote father's methodology was a direct relationship to how animals are usually traditionally drained of blood before they're, as they say, dressed, cut up and made in edible steaks and things like that. And so he was using an old farmer's methodology, which I found very interesting. And his little kit.
Yeah, there's a certain air of practice to that. Perhaps we do get insight into who he was before meeting this vampire figure.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the woman who turned into a vampire at least started to choose that, not like try to hold on to it. Like in the books too, sometimes vampires choose that over living this immortal life. But I was trying to reason it, like why did she choose that? But I couldn't come up with something. I mean, maybe it's the storyteller would send her away too, but I want to hear what does Jewelle think about it.
That's a great question. Jewelle, the question is the woman who was beginning to become a vampire herself, choosing death over continuing as a vampire. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that was pretty interesting and dramatic. Let me just say, what a way to go. That conflagration thing would never be my choice. I also think it's interesting that this story does not use any of the somewhat traditional methods of how people become vampires. They, in some ways you can exchange blood or a little bit, and then they kind of become in a semi-vampire state, but that wears off. Or in the more traditional, you have to be given the vampire blood several times. So I thought that was interesting, that it was like a contagion in a way, which I think is in keeping with this movie's depiction of vampirism as a kind of affliction, rather than a power. So.
Yeah. Do you want to try coming up to the microphone? We've got time for one more technical failure. You'll have to turn
Be overcome no matter what.
Right? If there's anything we've learned from the past few years, it's just keep trying until it works.
My first question, just to clarify before I make my point, what country was this made in?
This movie was made in Sweden.
So to go back to the traditional part, what I really like about this film is that it's so different than how America portrays vampires. Because from everything that I've seen, the way America portrays vampires is that it's all about the teen love, it's all about who's bad and who's not. And so I really liked how they focused on the raw feelings of being young and figuring out what's going on around you. And I think it made us pay more attention to how it is to be someone so different in such a different way. Because I feel like that's what made Oscar and Ellie connect really well. was the fact that they're both outcasts, and it showed a lot on how just having a similarity to someone really connects you even though you feel so isolated in the world. So I really like the way that they portray the human and vampire relationship and just the whole idea of being a vampire in general.
Nice. Jewel, were you able to hear that?
I could not. Can you I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
We should maybe be inviting people up here. Do you want to come up here and speak into the computer?
I'm sorry.
Let's keep trying until we find what works. And this way you get to see the people who are asking questions.
So, I want to talk back on what you said about the whole,
You're gonna actually get closer to the microphone or something.
Is this better?
Better, yeah, because you're talking through your mask, so it's a little muffled.
So I wanted to go back to what you said about traditional vampires, and what I really liked about this film is how different they portray vampires unlike how America does. Because in America it's really focused on teen love and who's bad, who's not. There's always a community. But with this film, it really helped us focus more on the raw feelings of being young and still figuring out what's going on around you. And what made Oscar and Ellie really connect was the fact that they're both outcasts, and it shows you how two different worlds can still be so similar. And as long as you find someone just like you, it shows how strong you can be together.
Yeah, I think it's that use of the outcast and the young people as outcasts bonding around being outcasts, I thought was very moving. I thought it was very moving. And the whole thing about good and bad, you're right. It's okay, well, some of the people might have been good that they got killed, but it was a hierarchy of survival at that point for the Ellie, who had no way of distinguishing good from bad, really, until they met, didn't I just go blank on his name? Oscar. And I think once that they met Oscar, that connectivity was so strong. The beginning of good, I think, was peeking through. But yeah, good observations.
You know, speaking to that point, they really help each other learn so much. Oscar has his murder album, and then after sort of figuring out who he is and what the implications of this are, he stops doing it. He's sitting there sort of lingering over an article and doesn't clip it and doesn't put it in his album. So they're able to help each other put away these sort of tools of isolation.
Yes, and I thought it was really good. Oscar starts to do the strengthening exercises. So it's not a matter of Oscar waiting for Ellie to always protect him. He starts to take his own life in hand and create his own physical strength so that he can fight back. I thought that was very Gilda-ish.
Yes, very much so. And as pointed out to me by someone who works out, the bar got thicker, which means heavier, as he continued to work.
Yes, that was great.
Yeah, good details. Any other questions? Anyone else want to come up? Come on up.
One of the things that I wanted to mention that I thought was really interesting, thinking about connection and isolation, is there's that motif that you keep seeing of them putting their hands up to the glass and kind of you know, they keep like connecting, but there's still that wall until the end. You know, we're finally there together. And even the idea of like using Morse code like between walls. And even the title, you know, is Let the Right One In. And at first you think maybe that applies to Oscar because, you know, it's a vampire, you don't know who should let this creature into your house. But then, you know, it also could apply to Ellie because, you know, here's this creature who's supposed to be so isolated, and it's kind of like she's opening up her heart to a new person, to Oscar.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the title is so perfect in that it does work in both directions. And that is such a classic vampire trope. You have to, you know, let me in, but it's also kind of a human thing, you know? Who do we let inside into our hearts? So yeah, that's a really amazing observation, and I feel that's part of the vulnerability the two characters have with each other, because they have to be vulnerable to trust. You know, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you. The American remake is called Let Me In, right?
Yeah, let me in.
We lose something so wonderful in that comment in losing the bright one from the title, right?
Yeah.
Those words. We lose like that idea of choice, that idea of fit, that idea of family, of finding each other. It's not
Right.
Yeah.
And in the American version, Elaine is not gender neutral, which I think that fact is such an important part of the depth of the telling of the story.
Right. What a loaded statement. I'm not a girl.
Yeah.
Right. It is so many things. And there's so much in that one simple sentence.
Yeah.
Which is not simple at all, as it turns out.
Yeah.
We have time for another question? We've got 2 more questions, so let's have you both go. I mean, one at a time, right? And then get ready. No, you don't have questions? You're just being very supportive.
Hi. Okay, so my question is, what's the deeper meaning?
Can you come closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so my question is, what is the deeper meaning behind the use of animals in these films? Because in the first film that we watched, they used dogs, and in this film it was cats, so I just want to know what's like the deeper.
The sound is going in and out. I don't know if we're getting to that technical problem again. The sound is going in and out.
I'll translate for her. It was a great question. Thank you, Sean. It was, what is the purpose of animals, or the symbolism of animals?
What is the purpose of what?
Animals.
Animals?
Yeah. So we have a dog in this one and the cats. We had dogs in the film we watched last night in The Lost Boys. So did you use the word symbolism or purpose? Both. She used both of them. So what do you think? What is it with animals and vampires?
I thought it was, and thank you, that is a great question. I'm going to think about that one as I'm working on my sequel to Gilda, because I didn't use much in terms of animals in the first one, but I really want to in the second one, and you're reminding me of that. I think that the animals were helping us understand how elemental the vampire is. You know, the vampire is hunting and surviving on what it can take down and eat or drink from. So, and then you see the beautiful, I guess it was a poodle, that beautiful poodle who's interrupting at the beginning comes right over and drinks that blood right off the ice. And I thought, oh yeah, that is really what we should know, even if we're afraid of this vampire or horrified, that the vampire is doing something so elemental that even a French poodle wants in. And I think the cats, again, you know, people all often say, and I don't want to get into an argument between dog people and cat people, but people often say that cats are much more attuned to quote unquote spiritual or ghostly or things like that. And I think in this case, the cats knew right off that they knew all through the story when coming in contact with this preternatural being that it was not the right way to go. And I think they got to use the cat as a way of showing that preternatural knowledge that cats are meant to have. You know, that was pretty amazing. Whereas the dog is more like, okay, we're hunters. I'm going to come over here and have a drink too.
Thomas Anderson, clearly a cat person. Anyone else with a question? Well, Jewelle, thank you so much for spending the night with us, for showing us your favorite vampire film, also one of mine. I hope now a few more people in the audience can say that. What an absolutely lovely keynote. Loved the piece you read. Thank you so much for your insights, your ideas, your novel, your poems, everything you're going to continue to do. We are very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming out and for reading the work, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. I am so happy to see each of you thinking about how vampire fiction and speculative fiction is used in our culture. And I'll tell you a quote from the surrealists in the 1930s, and it's kind of what I believe in. The surrealists said, in order to change the world, you had to first change your dreams. And that's what I think of writing speculative fiction is for me. I'm changing my dreams about how things could be in the world in the hopes that the world can change as well. So keep on dreaming, you all. And thank you, Professor, for inviting me. Get home safe.
You too. I'll be in touch. Thank you again, Jewelle.
Okay, bye.